are children who learn early how to disappear. Not because they want to, but because the world around them never learned how to notice. They grow up quiet, soft-spoken, observant, endlessly patient. They become the ones who apologize too quickly, who feel too much, who ask for nothing. Their silence becomes a language, their invisibility a kind of safety. But beneath that calm, something lingers, a faint ache that never quite leaves. It follows them into adulthood, shaping the way they love, the way they speak, the way they exist in rooms. This is not a story about trauma. It's about the invisible weight of being unseen, and how that small, quiet wound can echo through a lifetime. There are children who never interrupt. They sit at the dinner table, hands folded, eyes tracing the rhythm of voices around them. No one asks them how school was. No one notices when they grow quiet. They learn without ever being told that attention is earned, and that silence keeps things peaceful. For some, childhood is not marked by chaos or cruelty, but by a steady kind of emptiness. The room isn't loud, yet something vital is missing. The laughter feels distant. The warmth never quite lands. These children adapt by fading into the background, finding safety in invisibility. They become masters of stillness, the ones who don't cause trouble, who don't need much, who listen more than they speak. But invisibility, over time, begins to feel like identity. They start to believe they are quiet because they are that way, not realizing it was a shape carved by the silence around them. Each unasked question, each unnoticed effort tells them, you are fine on your own. And so they are. Fine. Self-contained. Independent in ways that seem admirable, but carry a quiet ache underneath. In school they may become the good kids. The teachers praise their calm, their politeness, their ability to stay focused. Yet beneath that composure is a longing, to be chosen first, to be seen without having to speak. They might smile when others overlook them, convincing themselves it doesn't matter. But deep inside, something small withers, a part of them that once wanted to be held without earning it. Childhood invisibility doesn't always look sad. Sometimes it looks peaceful, even proud. The unnoticed child learns to find meaning in solitude. They read books alone. They draw, imagine, or daydream. They become rich internally, building entire worlds where they can exist without waiting to be seen. There's beauty in that kind of self-reliance, but also loneliness. Because the longer they stay hidden, the harder it becomes to step into the light. When you grow up unnoticed, attention feels unnatural. Praise feels like a spotlight you never asked for. Even kindness can sting, because it reminds you of what you went without. So you shrink again, not out of fear but habit. You apologize for taking up space. You smile when you're hurt. You say, it's okay, before you even know what's wrong. And yet, beneath the layers of composure, there is a quiet memory of the first time you realized you were invisible. It might have been a birthday when no one showed up, or a moment when your excitement met silence. Small things that never looked like wounds but became them. The unnoticed child doesn't grow bitter. They grow observant. They learn to read rooms, to sense tension before it surfaces, to soothe discomfort that isn't theirs. They develop an empathy so strong it borders on self-erasure. Their attention turns outward, scanning for signs of rejection or need or imbalance. It becomes their way of belonging, not by being seen but by seeing everyone else. This is how a quiet beginning writes itself into a life. Not through words but through patterns, the way someone flinches when praised, the way they say don't worry about me, the way they hide their sadness behind calm smiles. The world calls them kind, composed, mature for their age. But beneath those traits is something simpler. A child who learned that love is quieter than they hoped, and that being easy to love means being easy to forget. Their story starts not with trauma but with absence. Not with what was done but what was never said. And in that silence they begin to build their first version of self. One that learns how to exist without being noticed, yet longs for the day someone finally will. The roots of invisibility rarely begin with cruelty. They grow quietly beneath ordinary homes, within families that look warm from the outside. A parent might be loving but distracted, burdened by their own quiet storms, financial stress, depression, or unresolved pain from their own childhood. They don't mean to ignore. They simply forget that presence is more than being in the same room. A child doesn't understand this. To them, absence is personal. When love is delayed, it feels withdrawn. When affection is inconsistent, it feels earned. They don't yet know that a parent can love them deeply and still fail to see them clearly, so they begin to adjust. They stop asking for too much. They hide their needs behind smiles. They learn that being good, helpful, or quiet brings stability, and stability feels like love. These are the invisible bargains of unnoticed childhood. They are never spoken, but they define a lifetime. The child's nervous system starts adapting around the lack of response. The brain, constantly scanning for cues, begins to associate safety with smallness. Neuroscientists call it adaptive attachment. Psychologists might name it avoidant bonding or fawning. But emotionally, it feels simpler, like holding your breath around the people you love most. Sometimes, invisibility begins in families where love is conditional. I'm proud of you when you succeed. You're such a good kid when you don't complain. Praise becomes currency. Approval a scarce resource. The child learns to earn their right to belong. They learn that to be visible is risky, because visibility invites scrutiny, and scrutiny threatens affection. Other times, invisibility is born from comparison. A sibling louder, needier, or more demanding of attention absorbs the light. The quieter one retreats, becoming the peacekeeper, the background harmony that holds the family together. They wear invisibility like armor, keeping everyone comfortable but themselves forgotten. Even love, when inconsistent, can wound. A parent who alternates between warmth and distance teaches confusion. One moment they are attentive, the next unreachable. The child learns to anticipate, to perform emotional roles that restore closeness. If I make them laugh, they'll stay. If I behave, they won't be angry. What begins as survival becomes identity. And yet, none of this is about blame. Parents too often grew up unnoticed. They inherited silence the way one inherits an old photograph, without realizing its meaning. Generationally, emotional neglect travels quietly. It's not passed through words, but through tone, absence, and the subtle ways people fail to look at one another long enough to see. Invisibility then becomes a lineage, a legacy of the unspoken. It teaches self-sufficiency, resilience, empathy, but also hypervigilance, people-pleasing, and a constant undercurrent of self-doubt. Children in these environments learn to become translators of emotion. They notice the sigh behind the smile, the shift in tone that signals danger, the silence that means withdrawal. They become emotional mirrors for their families, reflecting back stability while suppressing their own chaos. Over time, they forget the original purpose of this adaptation. It becomes who they are. Years later, they'll describe themselves as low maintenance. They'll say they don't like attention, or that they prefer to be alone. But somewhere inside, there's still that small child waiting for someone to notice. Not the polished version, but the trembling one underneath. This is the root of invisibility, the unspoken conditioning that love must be gentle, earned, or invisible. The pattern doesn't announce itself loudly. It seeps in slowly, teaching that the safest way to stay loved is to never need too much. And so they grow, carrying this quiet inheritance into every room, every relationship, every silence. Not realizing that what once protected them has now become the reason they still feel unseen. To understand what it means to grow up unseen, you have to understand what the mind does to survive it. A child's brain is wired for connection. Every look, touch, and response shapes how they understand love. When that connection is inconsistent or absent, the brain begins to reorganize itself around self-protection. It decides that it's safer to observe than to express, safer to anticipate than to need. Psychologists call this the fawn response, a survival instinct often overshadowed by fight or flight. It's the quietest form of fear. Instead of running from danger, the child learns to please it, to keep the peace, to mirror what others want to see. They smile when anxious, agree when uncertain, suppress their own emotions so others won't have to face them. It's not manipulation, it's adaptation, the nervous system's way of ensuring belonging in an unpredictable environment. But when this response becomes lifelong, it turns into a kind of self-erasure. Invisibility becomes muscle memory. The person learns to read others with startling precision, noticing tone, micro-expressions, mood shifts, yet remains a stranger to their own emotions. Their empathy becomes hyper-attunement, a radar scanning constantly for safety cues. It's exhausting. But to them it feels natural, even virtuous. Being unseen, paradoxically, can make someone incredibly perceptive. They can sense when someone's energy shifts before words are spoken. They intuit discomfort, sadness, tension, everything but their own needs. This sensitivity often gets praised. You're so understanding. You always know how I feel. And so the pattern deepens. Being needed becomes a substitute for being seen. Beneath that empathy, though, lies a subtle grief. The grief of being known only for how well you understand others, not for who you are. Over time, the mind begins to split in two. One side, outward-facing, calm, receptive, endlessly adaptive. The other, inward, numb, unsure, aching for recognition but terrified of burdening anyone. When you've been unseen long enough, even your own feelings start to distrust themselves. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm the problem. This self-doubt isn't weakness, it's conditioning. The invisible child grows into an adult who questions their right to exist fully. There's a psychological concept known as alexithymia, the difficulty in identifying or describing one's own emotions. Many who grew up emotionally neglected experience it. It's not that they don't feel, they feel too much but were never given language for it. So instead of saying, "I'm hurt," they say, "It's fine." Instead of crying, they smile. Their emotional vocabulary shrinks to match what others are comfortable with. Another layer is learned invisibility, the brain's tendency to minimize its presence to reduce rejection. This is why some adults become overachievers, perfectionists, or caretakers. They mistake performance for acceptance. Validation becomes oxygen. Rest feels dangerous because it removes their usefulness, the very thing that once kept them safe. In relationships, they may attract people who overlook them, not by fate but by familiarity. The nervous system returns to what it knows: unpredictability, distance, subtle neglect. Even when love arrives, they struggle to believe it. Intimacy feels overwhelming. Praise feels suspicious. Affection feels like a spotlight. Being unseen doesn't end when the child grows up, it evolves. It becomes the soft, invisible script running beneath every choice. Don't need too much. Don't speak too loudly. Don't take up space. But what the psychology of invisibility truly reveals is this. It's not that these people don't want to be seen, they were simply never taught that being seen could be safe. And so they live suspended between two desires: to disappear and to be found. To remain calm yet to be felt. To exist quietly yet to finally matter. This tension becomes the center of their emotional life, the invisible gravity shaping everything that follows. Adulthood does not erase invisibility. It only disguises it in more socially acceptable forms. The unnoticed child becomes the dependable friend, the calm coworker, the partner who never asks for much. They appear composed, grounded even, but inside there is a quiet split between who they show and who they are. The conflict begins when love enters the picture. Because love, in its truest form, demands visibility. It asks to be known, to be seen beyond composure. And for someone who has built an identity on invisibility, that is terrifying. They want connection, but connection threatens the safety that silence once gave them. They long to be understood, but when someone finally tries, they shrink. They deflect compliments, change the subject, or laugh off vulnerability. When someone says, "I see you," their instinct is to disappear again, to retreat into the comfort of being unseen. It's not rejection they fear, but exposure. To be seen means to risk misunderstanding, disappointment, or loss. It means letting someone witness the messy parts, the anger, the need, the loneliness. For the unnoticed, those parts feel dangerous, unlovable. They were never met with tenderness, so they learn to hide them. And so the cycle continues. They crave intimacy but choose emotional distance. They yearn to be chosen but avoid standing out. They want to be loved but struggle to believe love won't vanish once they're fully visible. This is the invisible tug-of-war inside them, between longing and protection. It shows up in relationships, work, even creativity. They might overperform at their job, pouring quiet excellence into tasks that few will ever acknowledge. Praise makes them uncomfortable. Invisibility feels familiar. The moment they succeed, they minimize it, saying, "It wasn't a big deal." Because to be proud of oneself feels almost impolite. In friendships, they listen deeply but rarely speak of themselves. They absorb others' emotions like water through skin, quietly taking responsibility for the moods in the room. They are peacekeepers, steady, kind, endlessly forgiving. But when they go home, they feel hollow. Not because others took too much, but because they offered everything except themselves. There's also the quiet resentment that grows in this space. A hidden ache that whispers, "Why does no one notice how much I give?" Yet the moment someone tries to give back, they resist it. The invisible child has grown into an adult who doesn't know how to receive, who feels guilt at the thought of taking up space in someone's care. Psychologists call this ambivalent attachment, a pattern where one oscillates between craving closeness and fearing it. They may fall for emotionally unavailable partners, people who mirror their own inaccessibility. They may stay in lopsided relationships where their empathy becomes currency, and their silence becomes a form of control, not out of manipulation but because speaking their needs feels unsafe. Internally, this conflict can feel like a low, constant hum. A quiet exhaustion. You keep functioning, keep being kind, keep showing up, but inside there's a persistent question: when is it my turn to be understood? And yet they rarely voice this. They know what it's like to be met with blank eyes. They know how heavy, unreciprocated vulnerability feels. So they keep their ache private, folded neatly beneath competence and grace. The inner conflict is not loud, it's quiet and civilized. It's the smile that hides hurt, the calm voice that trembles only on the inside. It's the lifelong tension between needing to be seen and needing to stay safe. And this is where the unnoticed begin to awaken, when the silence becomes too heavy to carry, and invisibility begins to feel less like peace and more like loneliness. Realization doesn't arrive like lightning. It comes softly, almost imperceptibly, in pauses, in small heartbreaks, in the moments between conversations. For those who grew up unnoticed, awareness begins as an ache that no longer hides well. You catch yourself apologizing for things you didn't do. You watch yourself smile when you want to cry. You notice the way you flinch when someone says your name too gently, as if tenderness itself were a threat. One day you realize that you have spent your entire life trying to be easy to love. And in doing so, you have forgotten what it feels like to simply be. The turning point is quiet, almost tender in its pain. It might come in therapy, or during a late-night walk when your chest feels heavy for no clear reason. It might come after being overlooked one more time, when your politeness finally cracks and grief slips through. It might come in the reflection of someone's eyes, when they finally say, "You don't have to be strong right now." And something inside you doesn't know how to respond. Because no one ever said that before. The realization is not just that you were unseen, it's that you learned to disappear for others' comfort. You realize how your softness became a shield, how your calmness was not peace but survival. You see how your silence protected others from your pain, and how your invisibility protected you from rejection. But now that same silence suffocates. There's grief in that recognition, the grief of a self you left behind. You begin to see all the small moments that shaped you, the times you were praised for not crying, the times you were ignored for being too quiet, the times you convinced yourself that love is patience rather than presence. You see the invisible contract you signed as a child, to never need too much, to never be the reason someone leaves. And yet, realization carries with it a strange compassion. You start to understand that you weren't broken, you were adapting. Every silence, every withdrawal, every soft smile in the face of pain was your nervous system's way of saying, "I'll make this easier for everyone." It's here that you begin to see your younger self, the child who waited to be noticed, who mistook invisibility for safety. You want to reach back through time and hold them. To whisper you did not imagine it. You were worthy of love all along. That moment changes everything. Because once you see the pattern you can't unsee it. You start catching yourself mid-apology. You feel irritation where numbness used to live. You sense anger, not rage but quiet, rightful anger, at the years spent erasing yourself to earn belonging. That anger, though uncomfortable, is sacred. It means you're beginning to wake up. The realization is not glamorous. It doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it's messy, crying at songs that never made you cry before, feeling a strange ache when someone looks at you too long, noticing how unfamiliar it feels to be cared for. It's not about blaming anyone, it's about seeing. Seeing how your life has been shaped by what you didn't receive. Seeing how invisibility is no longer safety but isolation. The unseen child inside you begins to stir, not to shout but to breathe. And maybe for the first time you let them. You stop shrinking when someone offers affection. You let silence exist without filling it. You look in the mirror and realize you've never really looked before. That's the moment of realization, when being unnoticed no longer feels bearable. When you begin to crave your own presence more than anyone else's approval. Healing begins in the smallest ways, not in declarations or reinventions, but in quiet acts of noticing. You start by noticing yourself. The tone of your voice. The way your body tenses when someone asks if you're okay. The moments you dismiss your feelings before they even have a chance to exist. These are the traces of invisibility, the habits that once kept you safe but now keep you small. Relearning visibility is not about becoming loud. It's about becoming real. It's the art of standing in your own light, even when it feels unnatural. It's saying, "I'm tired" instead of, "I'm fine." It's letting your voice shake when you speak the truth. It's remembering that you don't have to translate your emotions into something easier for others to handle. In therapy or solitude, you begin to unlearn the rhythm of self-erasure. You realize that visibility isn't about being seen by everyone. It's about allowing yourself to see what's been hidden. You start asking, what do I actually want? And the question feels both radical and confusing. Because for years, your wants were the background noise beneath other people's needs. Sometimes the first glimpse of visibility comes through anger. A feeling you once labeled wrong begins to make sense. It's the voice of the part of you that was never heard. Anger in this space is not destruction, it's awakening. It says, I deserve to exist. You learn to sit with it instead of silencing it. Other times, visibility feels like grief. You mourn the years spent pretending to be fine, the moments you downplayed your joy to seem humble, the relationships you stayed in because invisibility was familiar. This grief is not weakness, it's love returning home. Each tear acknowledges the child who waited too long to be chosen. Gradually, you begin to experiment with presence. You speak up in small ways, telling someone when they hurt you, saying no without apology, allowing yourself to rest without justification. At first it feels selfish, but over time it feels human. Because visibility is not vanity, it's honesty. It's allowing the world to meet you as you are, not as the version that keeps everyone comfortable. You may find that visibility attracts discomfort. People who benefited from your silence might not understand your voice. Those who once relied on your selflessness may mistake your boundaries for distance. This too is part of healing. Visibility always changes the balance of a room. But it also draws in the right kind of people. The ones who don't need you to disappear to love you. The ones who don't interpret calm as consent, or kindness as permission. In their company you begin to relax into your own skin. You start to believe that love can exist without performance. Neuroscientists say the brain is plastic, capable of rewiring through new experiences. Each time you speak honestly, your nervous system learns that visibility is not danger. Each time you express need and someone stays, your body relearns trust. Slowly, your sense of safety begins to shift from invisibility to authenticity. Relearning visibility is not a single act but a lifelong practice. A gentle, ongoing choice to exist fully in each moment. To be noticed, first by yourself and then by the world. And as this new self emerges, you realize that visibility is not the opposite of peace. It is peace. Because to be seen, truly seen, and still loved, is the quiet redemption that every unnoticed soul has been waiting for. There is a quiet moment, sometime after the grief, after the relearning, when you realize that being seen no longer feels dangerous. It feels natural, soft, almost sacred. You notice it not in grand transformations but in the subtleties, the way you no longer rush to fill silences, the way you can sit in your own company without needing to shrink, the way your laughter sounds unguarded now. You begin to recognize yourself not as someone waiting to be noticed, but as someone who notices themselves. The art of being seen is not performance, it is presence. It's not about demanding attention, it's about allowing yourself to exist without disguise. It's standing in a room and knowing that you don't need to be the quietest or the strongest or the calmest to be worthy. You are allowed to take up space, not because you've earned it but because you exist. For those who grew up unnoticed, this realization feels almost like a homecoming. You start to sense the difference between being watched and being witnessed. Being watched is conditional, it depends on approval, success, or beauty. Being witnessed is different. It's when someone sees you not for what you do, but for who you are when you stop doing. That kind of seeing is rare, but it begins with you. You look in the mirror and, for the first time, you do not search for flaws or validation. You simply look. You make eye contact with yourself the way you once wished someone else would. You say your own name softly, and it feels like an introduction to someone you're finally ready to know. The art of being seen is also the art of seeing others differently. When you stop hiding, you start to notice how many people are still doing what you once did, folding themselves small, apologizing for breathing too loudly, mistaking invisibility for humility. You start to see their pain with gentleness, not pity. You understand that everyone is carrying an invisible history, and in that understanding, empathy deepens. You begin to live slower, to speak with intention, to listen without absorbing, to love without losing yourself. Visibility stops being something you chase and becomes something you radiate. It's the quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind of stillness that feels like belonging, not in others but in yourself. The unnoticed child within you never truly disappears. They sit quietly in your heart, still cautious, still tender. But now you can hold their hand. You can tell them it's okay to step into the light. They look around and realize the world is not as cold as it once felt, that there are eyes that see with kindness and hearts that stay. Being seen, in its purest form, isn't about visibility to others at all. It's about returning to yourself after years of distance. It's about allowing your truth to breathe, even if no one else claps for it. It's the quiet exhale after decades of holding your breath. And maybe this is what healing truly means. Not becoming someone new, but finally allowing yourself to be what you always were: whole, perceptive, deeply human. The world will still rush. People will still overlook. But somewhere within you, there will always be that calm knowing that you no longer need to vanish to be loved. You were seen the moment you began to see yourself. And in that recognition, invisibility dissolves, leaving behind only presence, only light, only the gentle truth of being fully, unapologetically here.